Now that we're through the first quarter, it's time for number 75. The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. This is the 2005 version with Denzel Washington and John Travolta. Again, the original is also a really good version, kind of harking back to The Blob and House on Haunted Hill. It's a really good version. I just always liked this version. Basically, it's about a group of men who take hostage a single subway car in New York City and demanding a ransom to be paid. John Travolta plays the head hijacker, and Denzel Washington plays the unlucky person who happens to be working at the radio at the time of the first call. Number 74, The Loft. This is the American version of this movie, which you've probably never heard of any version of this movie, but this is the American version. Basically, a group of men gather together to purchase a loft in the city that they live in. I think it's supposed to be New York, but I don't think they actually specify. They purchase a loft so that they can have somewhere to go to have affairs. And one day they find a woman dead on the bed, handcuffed to it, and they try to figure out how she got there, as there are only 5 guys who own this loft and only 5 keys to the front door. It's a really good suspense film. It has some nice little moments of intrigue in it. It's really paced nicely for what it is. It has some strong performances by a lot of actors you don't expect to see in major motion pictures. It is really good, and again, it's another one. When I first watched it, I expected, this is going to be an alright movie. I was super surprised when I first watched it, and now I enjoy watching it very regularly, actually, for what this movie is. Number 73, Money Monster. George Clooney is the host of a kind of money talk show where he talks about investments and everything that's great in life, how we can make more money. And Julia Roberts plays his producer. What happens is one day a distraught fan of the show walks in with dynamite strapped to his chest and straps some to George Clooney and takes the show hostage until he finds out why a stock plummeted when he was told off of this show that it would do great things. And it's about the investigation as to why it happened that way. Why did the stock go down? Number 72. Number 71, Repo, the Genetic Opera. This movie is directed by Darren Bousman. It's a rock opera. You might know Darren Bousman if you like horror movies. He directed about half the Saw films. This is what he did instead of directing another Saw film. It is super good. It's got great music. It's based on a play that was performed but never really caught on. Basically, it takes place in a future where you can now get organ transplants basically whenever you want. And it's fashionable to get your body parts completely replaced, and possibly your entire body. Except, this comes at a very hefty price that you basically pay off in installments, and if you miss a payment, well, whatever is now overdue gets repossessed by a repo man, which generally leads to your death because we're talking about organs. Number 70, Dracula, Dead and Loving It. This Mel Brooks film is one of his later films. It actually might even be the last one he made. Either it's this one or Robin Hood Men in Tights. But it is super good. I think it is super underrated for what it is. It is Mel Brooks' take on Dracula. He already did Frankenstein with Young Frankenstein. Now he's going back and doing Dracula. And I think it is hilarious. I think Leslie Nielsen is amazing in this movie. Peter McNichol is laugh out loud funny in this movie. He is worth watching this movie just for Peter McNichol's performance as Renfield. Mel Brooks gives a strong performance as Abraham Van Helsing. It is a great comedy that really does take what is Dracula and what became of Dracula, both from the Bela Lugosi all the way up to Gary Oldman's performance of it, and just lampooning the whole thing. Number 69, Zombieland. Simple plot here, zombies have taken over the world and the last survivors have to band together to fight them off and go to an amusement park. It's basically the story of Zombieland. It's a great comedy. They just came out with the sequel, which is also pretty good, but not good enough to make this list. But the original is a very strong comedy. I highly recommend it. If you like comedies, if you like zombie movies, it's worth seeing. What would have been number 68, Devil's Carnival. This is the short film I mentioned that I was going to talk about anyways. Devil's Carnival is actually made by the same people who made Repo the Genetic Opera. The exact same people, the same writer, the same director. And basically it takes place in hell. People go to hell and are tormented through Aesop's fables with tremendous music. There's a lot of good songs for this thing only being about a half an hour long. Number 68 is Batman Mask of the Phantasm. This is the Batman the Animated Series movie. It was put in theaters. Number 67, The Gambler. This is the movie about a man who is kind of his own depression. They kind of hint at that it's because his father has died, but he's kind of lethargic, and he begins gambling. Gambling so much he accrues incredibly high debts that he has no intent of ever paying off, and actually just raises those debts to get more money so he can gamble away frivolously at roulette and blackjack. Mark Wahlberg stars. He is really good, but he is overshadowed in this movie by John Goodman, who plays one of the bookies he takes money from. It is a great role by John Goodman. The entire movie is very strong, it's very entertaining, and it is just a really good movie. Number 66, Free Fire. Have you ever wanted to see what a gunfight actually looks like in real life? It is probably a very close representation of it is this movie. Basically, it's about a gun deal back in the 70s that goes wrong between the sellers of the guns and members of the IRA. It turns into an actual standoff gunfight where you can't really hit anyone because it's not that hard, it's not that easy to hit moving targets. And basically, by the end of the movie, everyone's crawling around because although they haven't actually been shot, they've definitely had ricochets and other things take them in the legs and drop them out. Number 65. If you're talking about movies people have probably never heard of, we have Margin Call. It's true, I found this on Netflix. This was years ago, years and years ago I found this movie on Netflix. And I just decided to watch it, and I'm really glad because it was super good. Basically, it takes a look at the stock market crash that happened about 10 to 15 years ago. And people who have realized, and what happens when you realize that's about to happen the day before. Basically, you have a group of stockbrokers who spend an entire night trying to figure out how to get out from this massive loss that they're about to take, and if there's a way out of taking this loss. Shaun of the Dead. This is Edgar Wright movie number 4 we're talking about. This is his first theatrical film and the first pairing of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in a theatrical film, and is part of the same series that Hot Fuzz was part of. Basically, Shaun is your average, everyday Englishman who kind of neglects his girlfriend, loves hanging out with his best friend at their local pub, and works a dead-end job until one day, zombies show up, and he has to fight for his life with his best friend, his girl, his mom, and his girlfriend's 2 best friends. It's a really great movie. It's a funny movie. Number 63. Number 62, Airheads. Here's a movie about 3 men who form a band called the Lone Rangers. I'm going to say that again, just so you understand that it's pluralized. It is Lone Rangers. They can't get any airtime and nobody cares about their band, so they decide to break into a radio station and take everyone hostage with squirt guns. Number 61, 4 Rooms. This is a really weird kind of entrant because it's basically an anthology film with a very direct wraparound story featuring Tim Roth as a bellhop. He's in all the stories, he's the central character, but each story is directed by a different director. One of them is done by Robert Rodriguez, one of them is done by Quentin Tarantino, and the other 2 are done by directors I've never heard of before. But they're all really good stories, and they all flow together kind of nice. It takes place on New Year's Eve at a hotel that used to be very popular in Los Angeles by the rich and famous, but has since had a decline. Each segment focuses on a different room in the hotel. The first segment involves a coven of witches. The second segment involves a husband and his wife. The third segment involves a pair of children who are left alone at night while their parents go out to party on New Year's Eve. And the last segment involves an actual Hollywood star who has decided to stay in this hotel and the shenanigans he gets into after watching an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Number 60, Dogma. Here's a movie that's by Kevin Smith. I enjoy Kevin Smith movies. This one is, God is out of commission, and so the last scion, the person who shares a small amount of genetic code with Jesus Christ himself, is tapped to stop a pair of renegade angels who are kicked out of heaven from being forgiven of their sins and getting back into heaven, because that would basically go against everything God has said, saying that these angels will never be allowed back in heaven, and destroy everything that we know and love. Number 59, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Die Hard is one of the few series of movies I take as individual films all the time. I will never sit down and watch all the Die Hard movies in a marathon in a row, because to me they are just so different from each other. The only connecting thread they really have is Bruce Willis. This is the 3rd movie in the series where Bruce Willis is finally a New York cop in New York, and he is put onto a demented game of Simon Says, where if he fails, things will blow up. This is all a cover for a greater robbery yet to come. Jeremy Irons plays the villain, and Samuel L. Jackson is the person who tags along with Bruce Willis in this installment. It is a great movie. I always enjoy this movie, and it's always really hard for me to decide which one I like better between this one and the first one. But I do really enjoy this movie, and it always has a nice, warm place in my heart. Number 58, Bowfinger. I don't even know where to start with this movie. It is just one. I didn't care for it that much when it first came out, and I first saw it. When I first held that VHS copy of Bowfinger in my hand, I popped it in a VHS player and went, this is an alright movie. But I'm a huge Eddie Murphy fan, which is really sad because this is the only Eddie Murphy movie represented on this list. But I'm a huge Eddie Murphy fan. So I watched it again, and I watched it again, and I watched it again, and all of a sudden I realized this movie is amazing. It is hilarious. Steve Martin is great in it. Eddie Murphy is great in it. Basically, it's a film producer and director who gets a script that is an amazing script, but he has no money to finance it, and no one will give him any money. So he decides to get a big-name star out of Eddie Murphy by simply following him around and filming him, sending the actors in unknowingly to interact with him and just filming his reaction to their lines of dialogue and trying to make a movie that way. Eddie Murphy plays the star. He also plays the stand-in, who turns out to be the star's twin brother. Number 57, Identity. Here's another John Cusack movie on this list. Basically, John Cusack and a gaggle of other people get rained out and have to stay in a motel. It is such heavy downpour, roads have been washed out, they are stuck at this motel. And, well, people start dying, as often happens when groups of people are stuck in a motel in a movie. What's weird is that also what's going on at this exact same time is a serial killer is being brought in for a competency hearing, believing that he was unaware of the crimes he committed. But he's in transit as well. So it's kind of a weird movie. It has a twist in it that that's actually very enjoyable. I really like this movie. Ray Liotta gives a strong performance in it. Amanda Peet gives a strong performance in it. John C. McGinley has a strong performance in it. It's a great movie. It's a fun movie. And it's really worth the watch. Number 56, Die Hard. Like I said, it was kind of hard to figure out which one I liked more, and clearly I liked this one marginally more. It's hard to say because I really enjoy all these movies, so putting them in this kind of discerning list is hard. It is kind of a pot shot because, you know, what makes this better than Identity is opinion, basically, my opinion. But here we are up to Die Hard. It is the Christmas movie everybody knows of, where Bruce Willis ends up in Nakatomi Tower when it's being taken over by terrorists, and he has to crawl through vents to fight them off. Number 55, The Greatest Showman. Here's a musical that I really wanted to see when it came out, and I was very, very happily enjoyed what this movie offered. It's how Barnum began his life in the circus and how he created his first circus. Barnum is played by Hugh Jackman. You also get Zac Efron in there. They have great voices, and there's a lot of great music in this movie. It's a very touching story, and for me, somebody who wants to get out there and be a performer and do stuff and try to do something different, it's a really inspirational movie, and it's super enjoyable. You might be sick of the music because it was kind of really overplayed when the movie came out. Luckily, I saw it the day it came out, so I didn't really have to deal with that. Number 54. Number 53, Murder by Death. The first time I watched this movie, I wasn't watching this movie. I was working on editing a video I was making at the time, back when I made crappy low-budget films. I was editing a video, and my brother happened to be sitting on the couch watching this movie while I was off behind him editing. So I kind of heard bits and pieces of the movie, and I got sucked into it. And it inspired a play I wrote that I really enjoy called Murder with Snacks. This is one of the inspirations behind it. It's basically the old Dark House comedy, Dark House movies thrown into a comedy performance with a bunch of the old inspectors and detectives of the age transported into this comedy world as well, such as Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, among others, played by comedians. Number 52. Rat Race. Take It's a Mad World, cut about half the cast out of it, condense it down to an hour and a half, and you have Rat Race. It's a fun film starring great performances by Rowan Atkinson, Whoopi Goldberg, Seth Green, and Cuba Gooding Jr. It's that madcap adventure feel where they are sent on a race. They all go to Las Vegas. They're selected for a special prize. That prize is a cross-country road race. Whoever gets to the point first, using any means at their disposal, wins a bag full of cash shoved in a train locker. And they're off. It's a great movie. It's full of great comedy. And again, if you like It's a Mad World, I maybe had too many mads or not enough mads, it's hard to remember, and you've never seen this movie, go out and see it. It's worth seeing it. It is a lot shorter and has a lot less actors in it. The Princess Bride. Personally, there was no way I was doing a top 100 list without including this particular film. It is a classic. You know, it really is a tale of action, love, magic, giants. The tagline was perfect for this movie. It is such an amazing piece of film that it is one you just go back and watch over and over again. It is an overhyped piece of film, so there is that problem if you're a person who doesn't like watching overhyped movies. it's still really good. There's not much to say. It's kind of like Die Hard. Most people know what this movie is.